Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host Jeff Cohen. We have a ton to talk about today, Jeff. This was a week where we were originally kind of just thinking, we're going to have just our normal talk, just talk about somebody at each level of the league. And then here we are a week later. And in the past week, we have 5 noticeable promotions within the farm system and probably more to come, right? I think right now we haven't heard more today, but there's an opening in Chicago this week for a starter. There is kind of a question of what the rotations are going to look like at each level now that we've had a promotion. So we are going to dive into all that today. We've got, just a preview here before we do our intro and go over the teams, right? Noah Schultz, Jacob Gonzalez, the past 2 first-round picks, in addition to Eddie Park, Grant Taylor, second-round pick, and Ryan Burrowes, a highly regarded international guy. All 5 of those guys promoted this week, with 2 going to Birmingham, 1 going to Winston, and 2 going from Arizona up to Kannapolis. So a ton to talk about in terms of promotions. We've got our hitter and pitcher of the week, as always. We've got a little discussion on kind of how all these promotions and the pitching depth is going to shake out come next year, and everything else in between, in addition to our normal just run through each level. So we've got a ton to talk about. But first of all, Jeff, how are you doing today?
All good, Elijah. Hope you are.
Yeah, everything is good. It's an exciting time. This is what we've been waiting for. I think we've been talking about for weeks. When's that first thing going to drop where we start to see some guys that are like just simply too good for whatever level they're at? And it seems like it's happening right now. So we'll start here with each record, right? Charlotte coming into this week is 19-25 for a team that came into the season with pretty low expectations. Charlotte's not playing bad baseball, Jeff. I know you've been there for a handful of games. They're playing some solid ball right now. Birmingham is 24-14 after a pretty rough week or two. Birmingham was at one point, right? They were 20-7. So it's been an iffy last 2 weeks for Birmingham. The offense has struggled and cooled down a bit, but generally speaking, that team, as we're going to talk about later, that team is one of the best in minor league baseball and should only get better with 2 new additions, 2 new first round picks joining that squad. And then Winston comes into this week at 19-20, up and down for Winston, but definitely some great signs like we've talked about. And now 2 of their best players are heading up to Birmingham. And then Kannapolis at 21-17. Huge week for Canny this past week. The Canny offense is just exploding. We've been talking about, this lineup has a lot of guys coming. At the beginning of the season, you look at the lineup and you were like, where are these guys that we're looking for? And then now you look at that lineup and you're like, oh man, this lineup is hitting. So that's where the teams stand right now. All 4 teams, this is something we haven't had in a while, Jeff. All 4 teams, and this including the ACL, right? I shouldn't forget to mention the ACL, the Arizona Complex League team, that is 6-4 now. So that team as well has got a ton of talent. All 5 of those teams, something to watch there, right?
Yeah, and something happened again this week that happened earlier in the year that we have never seen, and all 4 teams had winning records again. It's the second time this year. That's amazing.
Wow, is that right?
Because, with a 6-game schedule, that means you've got to win at least 4 games. So,
did Birmingham win 4 this week?
I think they won 4.
I didn't think Birmingham did, but you might be right.
Yeah.
Let's see this. Well, there you go. I mean, there is a lot to like right now in this farm system. We continue to talk about it every week, but there is truly just a lot to watch and a lot to like. And there's a reason these promotions are coming. So we will start the episode there. We'll get into all of our other normal stuff later, but it's promotion time, Jeff. We will start with the Birmingham Barons. Noah Schultz, yesterday, the news broke earlier in the day. Shout out to Chase Ford, MILB Central. That guy is killing it. He's broken a lot of new promotions of recently. Noah Schultz heading to Birmingham. Schultz is, we know Schultz's talent, right? But what I thought was initially this season was like, oh, he's only throwing 4 innings per start. I don't know if we see him till, mid-season in Birmingham. Not that he can't handle it, because we know he can handle Birmingham in terms of his talent, right? The guy has, this season he's got 42 strikeouts and 27 and a third innings. I mean, and a whip of 0.91. Like Schultz the ERA is slightly inflated due to a few home runs he's given up, right? But we know his stuff will play in Birmingham. I just wasn't sure they were ready to make that commitment, given that he's only throwing 4 innings per start, right? But here we are. And yesterday, Noah Schultz heading to Birmingham. It creates a lot of question marks in terms of the rotation. Do they go to a 6-man, or does Drew Thorpe finally get a promotion to either Charlotte or Chicago? That remains to be seen. But first, of your thoughts on Schultz heading to Birmingham.
Well, just last week, you and I were kicking around this very topic, and I think it came down to, yeah, he's too talented for the hitters in high A, but he's got so few innings under his belt that, we need to pump the brakes a little bit. But clearly, the White Sox, it's a different regime than we've seen in previous years. The White Sox said he's ready, at least skills wise, for Double A.
Yeah.
I wonder, does he spend all year in Double A and then all next year in Triple A? I mean, his timeline is insane. I mean, he's still so young and has so few innings.
Yeah.
He's already in Double A.
I, You're right. I think it's a question of being careful, right? But also wanting to see what happens and wanting to give him the opportunity to make his mark and to really, take his game to the next level at a higher level and see how his stuff plays against this stuff. I mean, it's right. 7 walks, 42 strikeouts. Like the stuff is there. I mean, that's silly numbers. And we know he's a guy that's going to continue to just put up numbers and continue to rack up strikeouts regardless of what level he's at, because this is a 6'9" left-hander with an elite fastball slider combo. And that's going to continue to play at every level. But, he's young, right? 20 years old. This is going to be the highest level he's faced. It's a big jump generally. High A to Double A tends to be the biggest jump in terms of the minor leagues. And it's where a lot of guys in Double A either thrive or struggle a bit, right? And I think Schultz is going to be a guy that continues to thrive. But it is interesting to consider the timeline. I think he probably just spends this whole year in Birmingham. And one thing that I want to mention here, because we're going to get to Gonzalez too, the White Sox, it's not Project Birmingham, because Project Birmingham 2 years ago was kind of just forcing prospects to Birmingham for the sake of getting your top prospects in the same place, which I never really got the idea of. This is what the real Project Birmingham is, because this is not forcing guys. This is simply put just every top prospect, almost every top prospect now in the system on one roster. And that is incredibly cool, because we're going to see these guys start to gel, and we're going to see them play together, and we're going to see them learn to play together. Guys of all different ages, different backgrounds, a bunch of guys brought in via trade, a bunch of guys drafted, some guys internationally signed, right? This is a collection of the top talent in the system now, with the last 2 first-round picks now being added to the Birmingham roster. Like, these guys are going to grow together. And this season in Birmingham, like, this team could easily win a Double-A championship this year, a Southern League championship for sure, first of all, right? That's one aspect of it. And another aspect of it is just all of them being together and growing together. It gives you the outlook of, look, like this core in Birmingham could make up the entire core of the White Sox essentially come 2026, right? Like we've talked about.
Well, it's not as crazy as it might sound on the surface, because, all these guys are probably going to follow each other to Charlotte, and they're all going to, several of them are going to get big league experience at the end of this year. And if not this year, they'll probably almost all will be in Chicago at some point the year after. So you're right. They're all going to kind of move together.
Yeah, 100%. It's cool. I think it's a creative idea. I like it. I think it's just, Schultz is ready. And like we talked about with Gonzalez, so shifting gears, Jacob Gonzalez, right? 2023 first rounder, really struggled last year. His first professional season, right? He was in Kannapolis and really struggled. He didn't look like a player that was a first round draft pick, made a ton of adjustments this offseason, came in, just looked great off the bat this season. We were like, this is a different Jacob Gonzalez. He starts the year in Winston-Salem, 36 games in Winston, a 763 OPS, 19 walks, only 17 strikeouts, 8 stolen bases, 3 home runs, 15 RBIs, consistent defense at shortstop, right? And this is a guy that just, he's faced single A, high A level pitching in college, right? He played at Ole Miss. He played at some of the best college pitchers in baseball, right? Double A is that difference, right? You saw it with Tim Elko down the stretch last year and then to start this year, right? Like, you can be a great college hitter, and when you get to Double A, that's when you start to see pitching that you've never seen before. So Jacob Gonzalez, like, he wasn't destroying it in high A, right? Like, he wasn't dominating high A baseball, but he looked like he was a pro, and he looked like he was ready to get another level of challenge, honestly. And this is like, yeah, it might seem aggressive, but this is a guy that's 21 years old already. He's going to be 22 next week. So 22-year-old for the rest of the season, again, with a ton of experience against high-level pitching, first-round pick, right? Like, let's do it. I'm all for it. And on top of that, right, like, the one thing you can look at in Birmingham and say, oh, that's a little bit of a weakness, you've got some holes, is the infield now. Because with Ramos going up to Chicago, now being on the IL, whatever, third base is open. Second base was already kind of a weird spot with Jason Matthews and Alessandro Womack, but there wasn't really a clear second baseman. So now you're in a situation where you've got Brooks Baldwin, who's been amazing at shortstop, but you add Jacob Gonzalez to that mix, and you've got Jacob Gonzalez, Brooks Baldwin. a little bit of a shortstop platoon. Maybe Baldwin simply just shifts to second. Maybe Gonzalez gets some reps at third. I wouldn't mind seeing that, actually. So what do you think about what kind of the lineup in Birmingham and the infield looks like with Gonzalez being there now?
Yeah, it's going to be very telling when they line up for the first time. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if Gonzalez might not be best suited for second base because perhaps with Colson Montgomery at short, Gonzalez is the heir apparent of second base.
Yeah, that's interesting to consider. It's just I don't think you want to move him yet. I think with Gonzalez, like you don't want to. I don't think you want to put him at second base yet because you know he can handle second base. I think Brooks and Gonzalez, right? Like I think both those guys can handle second base. Like I don't think that's really a question for them. And I think with Gonzalez, just because you just drafted him last year, even with Colson, I think you want to keep getting him reps at shortstop. And then Baldwin, like you don't want to necessarily not give Baldwin reps at shortstop though because he looks good and he's been good there all season. He's been the best player in Birmingham throughout this entire year. He bounced back offensively this week after a little bit of a cold streak. Like he just looks good. So my guess, I could be totally off here. I think you prioritize Gonzalez to an extent because he's your first rounder, because he's kind of in this first professional season. But I think you see somewhat of a 2/3, 1/3 shortstop split in favor of Gonzalez, and then that 1/3 being Gonzalez tested out at third, and then when Gonzalez is at short, you put Baldwin at second. I think that maybe makes sense. I don't think Baldwin's really set up to be a third baseman. Maybe he is too, but I think you're going to see both of them get shortstop reps, and I think you're going to see Baldwin start to get more time at second, and Gonzalez get more time at third, and maybe second as well too.
Well, Baldwin may prove us wrong, but right now I think we kind of see his role as a utility player, and if that's the case, let's move him all over Birmingham.
Yeah, and he's almost proven that outlook wrong this year already just by being so incredibly impressive so far in his first season in Birmingham, right? Like he's been so good that you're almost looking at him like, man, this guy could be your starting second baseman in the big leagues, right? Yeah. But at the same time, like that versatility is important, and that's one thing that makes him super appealing as a player is that you could put him anywhere in the infield or even the corner outfields or wherever, like you saw last year in Winston, and he'll succeed, right? So I think you're going to see a mixture. I think they'll start to move Baldwin around and make Gonzalez more of the primary shortstop just because he has that draft pedigree, because he's kind of in his first full year. But I would like to see Gonzalez at second and at third because, Brian Ramos looks good, right? But I'm not sure he's penciled in at third forever, right? And second base is still a massive question mark. So if either of Gonzalez and Baldwin, them being in the same middle infield and infield in general together is awesome because they can both play short and they both can get some time at second and third to see if they're comfortable at those positions as well moving forward.
Right.
So,
it's interesting times, but I'm most fascinated with the chain reaction that moving Schultz to Birmingham may touch off. Does it send someone to Charlotte? What happens in Winston-Salem and what happens to the rotation in Birmingham? Do they, Noah Schultz has been in a 6-man rotation last year and this year. So a 5-man rotation would be a big change for him.
So that brings us to the next question. We'll get into the other 3 promotions soon. But in terms of the rotation, this just feels like a good time to segue right into this. Noah Schultz joining Birmingham, right? Like this is already maybe the best rotation in minor league baseball. And now you add the top prospect in the top pitching prospect in the system, right? So like not only is Birmingham going to be just insanely hard to hit against, like I don't know how you game plan to face a week of Birmingham when you see the pitchers that you have lined up to pitch against you. I mean, it's crazy. But what does that look like? In my opinion, right? Like Schultz is the key factor, right? Because I don't know if Birmingham wants to get off. Birmingham, I don't really think they necessarily want to go to a 6 because a 6 doesn't really benefit guys like Mason Adams, guys like, Kai Bush, Drew Thorpe, who seem kind of ready, right? They already kind of are overperforming. I don't really know if you want to put those guys on a 6-man rotation, but Noah Schultz, as they kind of said at the beginning of the year, like Noah Schultz is going to pitch once a week. He's going to pitch on Saturdays. That's the plan for him, right? So I don't know what that looks like. The initial thought in my head is, Drew Thorpe should for sure get promoted. Like Thorpe's obviously the first guy to get a promotion from that group. But another factor to consider is like, I've heard some things about how the White Sox want to keep that core of all these top prospects together right now because they're playing together, they're meshing, they're growing together. So if you pull Thorpe away from that, and like you already did with Ramos, then you're kind of separating that core of guys. It's a give and take, right? I think it's a little tricky, but Thorpe, if you're not going to go to a 6, so one option is you go to a 6, right? You plug in Noah Schultz, you go to a 6-man rotation, everything stays as put. If you're not going to go to a 6, Thorpe's got to be the one to go up, right?
Well, And given the fact that the White Sox have moved so quickly with Schultz and Gonzalez, makes you think why are they gonna all of a sudden get cautious with Thorpe? He's demonstrated he can dominate AA hitters, just like Gonzalez proved he could hit in high A, and Noah Schultz proved he could pitch in high A, so they moved him up. So it gives us hope that Thorpe could be moved up sooner than later.
That's exactly right. And then you hear the news yesterday that Brad Keller was DFA'd. So
Right.
Brad Keller kind of had taken a rotation spot in Chicago recently with Soroka moving to the bullpen. Keller DFA'd now. They're going with an extra reliever for the next few games. But Thursday, there's this big old TBD on the White Sox schedule, and that's going to be a starter. And Griffol's comments yesterday indicated that it wasn't going to be Soroka. It sounded to me from his comments like he was planning they want to keep Soroka in the bullpen for now, which means you need a starter Thursday unless you go the bullpen day. So that, in my mind, signals one of a few things, right? You've got Nick Nastrini and Jonathan Cannon sitting in AAA, right? They've had their ups and downs since being optioned back down, right? But both of them we know can pitch at the major league level. Like, there's going to be some bumps. It might not be pretty all the way, but like, those two guys are major league ready pitchers. They had their debuts. They had their moment to get used to the bigs. They were both sent back down after struggling a bit. Both those guys could instantly plug into the rotation. I think Nastrini is the most likely option just because I think, you get the upside with him. He's had a few really good starts in Charlotte recently. I could see it, right? I can see Cannon too. The other option is Drew Thorpe. I think there's a world, Jeff. There's a world where the White Sox just say, you know what? We don't need you to pitch in Charlotte. It's a hitter-friendly ballpark. Thorpe is ready. And they can add him to the 40-man, and next thing you know, Thorpe could be starting for the White Sox on Thursday. Well, I don't know anything yet, but there's options.
It's not out of the question. I mean, they've demonstrated many times this season now that they're not afraid to take bold steps. And Thorpe needs a new challenge. He is completely dominating AA.
Yeah, aside from the one start where he got pulled in the first inning recently, other than that game, Thorpe has really just been untouchable. He's just too good for that level. So maybe it's a 6-man rotation and he stays there for another month, and that's fine. It doesn't really change anything ultimately, right? But like, I don't mind the idea of Thorpe just skipping Charlotte and being in Chicago this week. I really don't mind it. So we'll see what happens. There's going to be a lot of potential moves. And then the other factor, right? With Noah Schultz going up from Winston to Birmingham, there's now a spot in Winston. And I know for a fact that Winston's going to stay on a 6-man rotation. So they need a starter there. Option one, I'm going to give you the options, right? Or I'll give you 3 options because I think there really is 3 options there. And you let me know what you're thinking. The first option, Shane Murphy. He's been piggybacking off of Peyton Pallette recently, especially, but generally he's been piggybacking off of whoever starter goes kind of short, right? He's been the guy there. He was a starter last year, not a high pedigree prospect by any means, 14th round pick in 2022, but had a great season last year and then just is in the bullpen purely because he started the year hurt and the team is just deep, right? Like the system is deep with pitchers. Shane Murphy could slide right into Noah Schultz's spot on Saturdays. He could be your Saturday starter in Winston-Salem. Cool. No need to change anything else from there. You just add another relief pitcher to the bullpen to replace him, is what it is. I'm okay with that, but you know where I'm going with this. Aldrin Batista, Jeff. Aldrin Batista is too good to be pitching in single A. He just looks too good. He pitched there last year. He had a handful of games there where he looked like he was already going to be a stud. This season, he's off to an incredible start. He just is too good. He had his worst game of the season this past week, and his ERA is still 2.35, coming off a game where he got lit up a little bit, right? This stuff plays. It's moving. Everything moves with him. It jumps out of his hand. He's got a ton of extension the way he pitches. He's 21 years old. Sure, that's fine. But, 21-year-old Winston's not super young, right? Like he's ready. And then the other option is a guy like Lucas Gordon. Lucas Gordon has been, really steady and with college experience under his belt, I could easily see Lucas Gordon being ready for Winston. And frankly, both Batista and Gordon could immediately go to Winston and succeed, I think, right now. But at least for now, there's one spot open. If you've got a choice between Murphy taking the spot going out of a bullpen role or Batista or Gordon getting promoted, which of those 3 options is your pick?
I think you got to go with the guy who you think has the higher upside. So I'd go with either Batista or Gordon, whoever they're higher on right now. Even though, let me just share you briefly Shane Murphy's stats this year. 4 games, 12 innings, 3 hits, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts. Batters are hitting 0.75 against him.
There's no bad option. That's the thing, and it's tricky because like Shane Murphy's the guy that in a lot of farm systems right now would be in a rotation, like hands down. It wouldn't even be a question, right? Like
Yep.
I get it. Yeah, he's a 14th round pick. He's already 23 years old, sure, but like he's showing very clearly that he's good enough to be in a starting rotation at the high A level for sure. He could frankly be in the bullpen level in Double A at this point, honestly. But like you said, the upside of Batista, it for me is just too enticing not to give a rotation spot in Winston, because I think Aldrin Batista is a guy that you can look at amongst all those other pitchers in Canny and say like this guy could be really something. And that's something that I just have to I have to go that direction, because I've been kind of a huge fan of Batista this whole season. Every time I watch him pitch, I just love the way he pitches, and I think there's just a lot to tap into there and a lot he could continue to become. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that Winston rotation. It could be Murphy, it could be Batista, it could be Gordon. There's probably other options too, but I think those three are the most likely. And then, from there, it's like, it's just that trickling effect, right? What does that mean? Because then you have, assuming either if Batista or Gordon goes up, then you open up a spot in Canny, right? But getting to Canny now, we'll get there in a second, but there's other guys that just made their way into the rotation in Canny as well. Going down, we'll take a break from the pitching discussion. Going down to Winston-Salem, another promotion in Winston-Salem that flew a little bit under the radar with all of these is Eddie Park. Eddie Park was 8th round draft pick last year, and someone that he looked really good in Kannapolis, and he was part of that core in Kannapolis, right? That core of guys in Kannapolis that's just filled with all the 2023 draft picks. They're college guys, experienced, they know what they're doing. And Park now, after starting last season in Canny, looking good. This year he got a late start to the season with a little bit of an injury. Really looked great in Kannapolis. Makes his way to Winston this past week, and it's another addition to a pretty solid team in Winston, right?
It's crazy. We're talking like the Noah Schultz promotion, is going to break the log jam. It creates one opportunity,
Yeah.
But there is still such a log jam because you've got 4 college pitchers in Canny right now, right? You've got Lucas Gordon, you've got Grant Taylor, you've got Jake Peppers, who's pitching well, and
Seth
who's
Keener.
my 4th guy?
Keener. Yeah.
Seth Keener. They're all college guys. They're all like 22, 23 years old. You got to move them quickly once they demonstrate they can handle a level. But there's really nowhere for them to go. If I'm Tyler Schweitzer, I might be getting a little nervous that I'm going to lose my spot in Winston.
It's and he's been good, right? Like it's not like these guys have been bad. I mean, Peyton Pallette, right, has been the worst starter in Winston, and that's a 2nd round draft pick that you have a ton of hope for, right? So it's there's a lot of talent up and down the system. Eddie Park going to Winston is great, especially with Gonzalez going up. I think Park's going to be kind of that early in the lineup, top of the order guy that can kind of stabilize. He can get on base. He has good contact skills. So I'm happy to see Park in Winston because I think that lineup's going to need a little bit of a boost without Gonzalez in the middle of the order there. So great to see him get the promotion. And then, like you just started mentioning, right, Kannapolis gets 2 new additions this week too. And that team in Canny is looking really good, Jeff. And then you add a guy in Grant Taylor to that rotation who bumps out Brockenstadt to take that last rotation spot. And Grant Taylor, did you watch any of that first start of his in Canny?
I went to it. Yeah.
You were there, right? Yeah,
exactly.
I
was there. I talked to him actually before and after the game.
Yes, that was great. Great interviews.
I'm telling you, his fastball sits an easy 96 to 99.
Yeah.
My gosh. Yeah. And he says that's not even his best pitch. He really likes the sinker.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I was watching that game and I was super impressed watching it on TV. It was just, you just see just an it factor with Grant Taylor, the way he pitches, and it's 90s, it's high 90s with ease, and then you've got that cutter pitch that he's kind of, I think his cutter was his most used pitch, right? When you got a cutter at 94, and then you pair that with a heater that can get up in on your hands at 99, 98, 99, right? Like that pairing is crazy. A few really good breaking balls I saw that he broke off. He had one strikeout on kind of a sweepy type of slider that was really nice, and then you've got a changeup as well, right? This is a guy that mixes in maxes kind of everything, right? The cutter is a great pitch already. It's already kind of a plus offering in my mind. And the fastball is a little flat, but it's got a ton of velo. And I think what's really going to be the next step for him is kind of developing a little bit more of a sinker to it. If he can make that slider, a fastball from a 99 four seam into more of a 96, 97 with some sink on it, then you're looking at a guy that really has ace upside, right? Like the cutter mixed with the heat that he can throw. And if the slider and changeup continue to get a little bit better with time, like this is a guy that could be a really high end pitcher.
And you make a good point about his maturity. When I met him, it reminded me of meeting Colson Montgomery right out of high school. I thought this guy he's got quiet confidence. He's got poise. He's got maturity. I just got a really good vibe from him, just like I did with Colson, that I haven't gotten from a lot of other guys.
Yeah. So I mean, really
he's poised to move.
Really impressive stuff from Grant Taylor in his first start in Kannapolis. He's got to build up the innings, right? Coming off of Tommy John when he was drafted, right? Like similar to kind of the McDougal-Paulette situation from previous years, right? Like this year for him is all about getting innings. I get it. He's probably already too good for Kannapolis, but like, let's be patient with Grant Taylor, right? Like we don't need to rush it. He's probably only going to throw, 60, 70 innings this year. You don't want to overdo it with his arm, right? So he's going to be in Canny for a little while, I think. I think he'll finish the season in Winston for sure. But at the same time, like you don't want to rush his arm. Let's give him time with that type of upside coming off of TJ, like patient process. But at the same time, the stuff is incredible. I'm super pumped to see him in Canny for the rest of, the next few starts, right? And then the other guy making his way to Canny is Ryan Burrowes. Ryan Burrowes is still just 19 years old. I think we forget how young he is, considering he was, top Dominican performer in 2022. Last year spent the whole year at the ACL in Arizona. Stats came down a little bit, but, it's speed, it's approach, and it's contact. And it's just a fun player who, is going to be probably the primary shortstop in Kannapolis for the rest of the season, I would say. Maybe he makes his way. I don't actually think so. Maybe he gets a little taste of Winston at the end of the year, but realistically, Burrowes is going to be a guy at the top of the order in Canny for the rest of the season. And that's super exciting.
Yeah, let's see how he does and, whether he warrants a promotion or not, because you're right, he's awful young. This is his first week of pro ball.
Right.
I will say, I watched him for a week, and there were times he looked a little overmatched, but there was one game, and it was a tight ball game. It might have even been the beautiful game that Drew McDaniel pitched, where he got his hands inside and inside out a pitch to right center. It was a solid single for an RBI in a really close ball game. I thought that was a really great approach. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah, no, really, really good stuff. There was, again, you're right. There was a few at-bats I saw where he struck out and it just looked a little bit like he was getting overpowered, but 19 and really good numbers at the lower in the complex and in the Dominican, right? A ton of speed, really just get a nice twitchy swing. I like what I've seen from Burrowes, and I think, that's a guy who, when we've got all these other guys who are approaching big league ready, right, that we talk about at the higher levels, right? Like that's a guy you can circle in Kannapolis at the young level and say like, yeah, he's definitely a few years off, but there's a lot to like there and there's a lot to dream on there from a guy who still can kind of fill out a little more probably. And I know you talked to him. Great interviews, by the way, Jeff. That was awesome to get to hear from both Burrowes and Grant Taylor. Everybody that listens to us, you should definitely be checking out Jeff's interviews on Twitter at AAA Jeff. Great stuff, especially in Kannapolis this year. I know you've loved going to Kannapolis because the team is fun. There's good energy there. And Burrowes and Taylor, it was great to hear from both of them directly, right after they were promoted. There's really nowhere else you can go to get that type of content. So definitely make sure you're tuning in with Jeff's stuff and all we do at FutureSox. But Burrowes and Taylor, two new additions to a team that is already kind of rolling. That Canny team is looking pretty good right now.
Well, and you talk about Birmingham maybe being the best minor league baseball team at any level, and you might be right. But I tell you, for low A, Canny is all of a sudden looking really good because they've got some hitters on the team who look like they're ready to go to high A, but there's not a spot 100%. For them in high A right now. So
100%.
They've got a great staff. In fact, the staff is so good that when Grant Taylor arrived, they took Jake Bokenstead and put him in the bullpen. And this is after he had a 6-inning, 1 or 2-hit shutout on his last start. And he goes in the pen because, his 2.98 ERA is 5th highest among the starters.
Yeah. It's really impressive stuff. The pitching depth is just on another level right now, and we continue to say that every week, and it continues to be true. They keep proving us right, So it's really exciting. I love to see it. we will see what takes us from there. So that's all the promotions, right? Like, and there's going to be more. So we're recording this on Monday, and like we know there's going to be more this week because there has to be. Whatever this pitching staff looks like, it's going to be a trickling effect. We got to figure out who takes the Noah Schultz spot in Winston. We got to figure out if Birmingham either goes 6-man or if they promote Drew Thorpe. We got to figure out then who's going to the White Sox on Thursday, because it sounds to me like there's somebody that's going to be added to that roster in Chicago. I don't think they're going to go with either a Soroka or a Schuster, right? They could go those ways. It sounds like somebody's going to get a promotion and going to get a call for Thursday's start. So we will see, and we will keep you updated. But it's a really exciting time. These prospect promotions get me fired up. I love to see it. I love to hear from people's families and friends and people that are just excited to see them get promoted. It's a great time, and we can't wait to see all these guys at their next levels. Shifting gears a little bit, we're going to stick on the same direction. Before we get into our hitter and pitcher of the week, really quick, 2025, Jeff. As we look at the picture going into next season, right? This year, the White Sox look good right now. Actually, they look a lot better than they have early in the season, right? They're playing decent baseball. Looking at next year, there's probably 10 guys that you could see making starts for the White Sox next season, and not just making starts, but like being starters in the big leagues. What does that mean, right? Like Garrett Crochet, I think you can pencil in unless they trade him. Maybe they do, right? Eric Fetty looks great, right? Those two have been really good this season for the most part. Fetty seems like the more likely candidate to be traded, even though Crochet, it wouldn't shock me to see them cash in on Crochet, even though he's still only 25, which is crazy that Crochet is only 25, right? So let's say, just for the sake of this, right? Let's say they trade one of them. I think it's probably Fetty, probably to keep Crochet maybe. Let's say they trade one of those two, but not the other one. So you've got one of those two guys kind of heading the rotation. Going into 2025, what do those other 4 spots look like? I'm going to just name some names, and I want you to kind of give me your take on who your locks are and who the guys you think are more likely to fill out those 4 rotation spots are. Nick Nastrini and Jonathan Cannon in Charlotte. You've got Drew Thorpe, who's, Thorpe is, we know how good Thorpe is. Beyond that, you've got Mason Adams, you've got Kai Bush, you've got Jake Eder, you've got Jairo Iriarte. All those guys are looking good, and all those guys are putting themselves in position to be major league pieces next year or as soon as the end of this year, right? You've got Noah Schultz. I'm not saying he's ready for that next year quite yet, but you've got Noah Schultz. You got to keep him on the radar. And then beyond that, there's still a lot more. There's still a lot more than just those guys, right? I mean, there's more options than just that. So we'll start with those. If those are the options, basically the entire Birmingham rotation, in addition to Cannon and Nastrini and Charlotte, assuming one spot is taken by a Crochet or a Fetty, 4 spots, who are the 4 and who are the guys you think are for sure going to be in that rotation, and who are the ones that you think are kind of the more likely?
Well, I'm going to preface my comments by pointing out, as we do quite often on this podcast, that a typical major league team needs like 8 to 10 starters to get through a season.
100%, which is great.
So, yes, we can talk about who are the guys who get the bulk of the work, but I think a lot of them are going to see some time in Chicago. Yeah. But to answer your question, it's hard not to go with Thorpe, Cannon, and Nastrini. I mean, Nastrini and Cannon have demonstrated already that they can pitch in the major leagues. There's, it's not a big question mark. And Thorpe, my gosh, the way he looks now, I hope he's the guy who gets that Thursday call up, because I'd love to see what he can do.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
And then the other guy, the next guy I like is Iriarte. I mean, wow. He's having a phenomenal season, even though Thorpe's getting a lot of the headlines. Iriarte is amazing this year. And and the other guys, I'm curious how you would assess Adams versus Bush versus Eder. And then you've got all these college arms in Winston and Kannapolis, and they're going to move quick. I mean, Grant Taylor, once he gets his innings under his belt, he's going to fly through the system.
You're 100% right. So the way I look at it, I think Nastrini and Thorpe are the 2 that I'm penciling in. I think those 2 are the guys that I think the combination of upside experience, I think those 2 are there. Jonathan Cannon, he's ready, right? Like, I think he's big league ready. Do I think he has as much upside as some of those Birmingham guys? I'm not sure, to be honest. And that's what's tricky about it, is that balance between upside and, consistent proven ability, right? Because I don't know. it's hard to say, right? Like there's some guys in Birmingham that I think could be better than Cannon as soon as next year, right? And that's not to say Cannon's not a good pitcher, because he is, and he's going to make starts. But I could almost see Cannon being the sixth guy who gets spot starts, but is also long relieving a little, maybe kind of that Swiss Army knife type of long relief spot start guy. So right now I'm penciling Nastrini and Thorpe, right? I kind of want to pencil a guy like Mason Adams, which is that he could easily regress a little bit more. But I think Adams and Cannon are in that same kind of realm right now. But Adams right now is showing some upside that I'm not sure we've seen from Cannon yet. I don't know. I think Cannon and Adams are in a similar tier. And then the next tier from there. So I guess if I were to go with four guys, I would go Nastrini, Thorpe, Cannon, and Adams. But Iriarte looks amazing. So it's like the upside of Iriarte is higher than probably any of those guys aside from Thorpe. So with Iriarte, it's like, is he ready though? Does he have enough innings? But he kind of does. Like he's the youngest guy by far of that entire group, but he's got innings under his belt. He's got a lot of AA experience, right? So maybe Iriarte is the midseason call-up in 2025 or like the June call-up. Like maybe he doesn't open in the rotation, but he's up soon enough when one person gets hurt or when somebody struggles, whatever it is. I think then you look at a Jake Eder and a Kai Busch who, like, yeah, they're coming off of rough seasons, but Busch has been great this year. He's been steady. He's been consistent. The command has improved a lot. And Eder has gotten really unlucky. His numbers don't tell the truth of what he's been, right? I keep trying to tell people this, right? Like Jake Eder's got like a 2.9 FIP as opposed to like his 5.2 ERA, right? Like the numbers are inflated. He's gotten unlucky. All the predictive stats say he's due to be better. His strikeout rate's high. His walk rate is a lot lower than it was last year. It's almost half of what it was with Birmingham last year. So I like those guys, but I think, some of those guys are going to have to be relievers, right? Like I think that's the reality of it. And you want to keep them as starters right now. And there's no reason not to have them be starting right now. But a Kai Busch is someone that I've mentioned before. I think Kai Busch could be a heck of a reliever. He gives me the energy of a left-hander with that curveball who could really, really be a piece in the bullpen. And I'm not saying, you throw him being a reliever gets this bad rep. It's like, I think when guys come up as pitching prospects and starting pitching prospects, you're hesitant to put him as a reliever because you don't want to throw him in that bucket, right? But like, Kai Busch could be a great reliever, and teams need good relievers, right? Like it's valuable to have, especially left-handed relievers too. Like there's a lot of value in what Kai Busch brings to the table. So it's not to kick him down at all, but I see Busch maybe becoming a reliever next year because he's been really good, but I don't think he quite has the upside as a starter in comparison to an Adams or an Iriarte or especially, Thorpe, right? Well, it's a great question.
You've kind of answered this, but I'm going to put you on the spot anyway. Let's rank these guys in terms of ceiling.
Okay. Iriarte is number one. Honestly, I really do believe that. I think that might be a little bit bold, but if everybody who hasn't watched this, go check out the highlights from yesterday's 13 strikeout start from Iriarte. This is I've said it before, like this guy has the Dylan Cease model-esque kind of upside, right? Like the command has still been iffy at times, but it's been better this year. And when his stuff is playing and if his changeup develops a little more, that slider fastball combination is as good as anybody in the system and as good as almost any pitching prospect in baseball right now, like truly. So I think Iriarte by a hair. Okay. Then I'd go Thorpe. I think Thorpe's the floor with Thorpe is really high, but we've also seen the upside of a guy who can throw 7 shutout innings and you don't even know it's the 7th inning. And the next thing you know, Thorpe's at 90 pitches through 7 innings and he's just dicing up lineups and everybody's grounding out and striking out. I think I go Thorpe next. Oh man, it gets tough. It's really tough.
It really does
I think. I mean, we didn't even talk about Noah. I mean, I'm not including Schultz in this for reference because I think, like I said him earlier, right? But I think Schultz is probably 2026, right? Like I think you need to get those buildings built up. If Schultz gets called up, right, like that's number one. I think that to be clear, Schultz is in terms of pure upside, it's Schultz. Schultz and then everybody else. Schultz's upside is like we've talked, like he's superstar Cy Young level upside if things were to fully click for Schultz. So Schultz number one, if I'm including him, Iriarte, Thorpe, probably Nastrini next. I think Nastrini's fastball could hold him back a little bit, but I just think his pure stuff is strong enough where he could.
What about Grant Taylor?
Oh, I was considering next year. I mean, that throws
out. Yeah, I know you're coming next year, but I'm thinking
Grant Taylor's as high as almost anybody. I think you could put Taylor up there behind Noah Schultz, frankly. I think Taylor could be in that 2-3 conversation with Iriarte and Thorpe. Taylor is up there too. So this is a great comp. We should honestly save this even more for a full episode sometime. We can have a whole segment on it. But my top few, like Schultz, Taylor, Iriarte, Thorpe, Nastrini, maybe. Jake Eder also. Like Jake Eder's upside is super high. Like we haven't quite seen it yet, but Eder's upside is super high. there you can't go wrong. There's not Aldrin Batista too. I'd throw Aldrin Batista right in there with some of those guys too. So there's not a wrong answer. There's a ton of upside. There's also a ton of floor too.
And there's a guy that I don't think either of us know that much about, Riley Gowens. Right now, he's the best pitcher in. Now that Schultz is gone, he's the best pitcher in Winston-Salem. We don't know that much about him, even though if it doesn't rain, I hope to see him this week.
I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there's your perfect transition from you, Jeff, right there.
Okay.
We're as long as we're keep going here with these promotions in this rotation because we love talking about this and it's super fun to talk about. But we do need to get to this week's stuff briefly, and we're going to have a lot more cool things coming up in the next few episodes. But we'll dive right in. Pitcher of the week, Riley Gowens. That's exactly what you were just mentioning. Riley Gowens yesterday. I didn't get to watch much of the start, but I went and watched a lot of the replays from it and some of the videos. He was great. This is now multiple starts that we've seen from Gowens where you're like, whoa, let's take a second and look at this guy. The only thing with Gowens, right? Like he's already 24. So being a draft pick last year, he was a 5-year college pitcher. So he drafted last year at 23 years old, right? He's already 24 now. So I think that's a guy who, he should be performing well at high A for a 24-year-old, right? But his last few games have been like, okay, let's take a second and look at this guy a little deeper. Back-to-back 7-inning, 10-plus strikeout games for Riley Gowens. Last week, 7 innings, only 3 hits allowed, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts. This week, carries a no-hitter into the 6th inning, goes 7 innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 11 strikeouts. 2 games in a row where it was like, okay, let's take a look at this guy. Really impressive stuff from Gowens.
Yeah, if this keeps up another start or two, it's time for him to go to Birmingham.
Where does he? I mean,
yeah,
right? Like,
it's the same problem. What if Peyton
it's a good problem.
Gets rolling? There's nowhere for him to go. But
yeah,
we'll see.
It's a great problem,
maybe that prompts the White Sox to go ahead and promote Thorpe, and maybe even Iriarte at some point.
It should, and then there's also the question of like, does that mean? I'm not ready to say this yet because pitching depth is important, and we know that pitching depth is incredibly important to have, and the luxury of having it right now, and like this problem of having a logjam is a great problem to have for the White Sox, especially when you look at a team that's not competitive right now, and you're building a future right now. That's great to have. Do you consider moving an arm or two in the thing for some hitters? Like, is that something that comes into play this deadline? We saw it with Christian Mena, right? Like, right. Yeah, it hasn't worked out great so far for Dominic Fletcher, but like we saw it with Mena this offseason where it's like you have a pitcher who you like, but you don't like as much as some of your other pitchers. Can you move him? Can you afford to move him for a young hitter? Do we start to see a few of these young pitchers get moved for some young hitters? Because there is a lot. There's a totally different change in the hitting depth as opposed to the pitching depth, right? Yeah. There's some hitters we like, right? But the hitting depth is not at the level the pitching depth is. So is there a chance some of the guys get moved?
Gowens, right? I mean, that'd be insane.
That's not a guy you move. Yeah, I don't think that's a guy you move because
but I'm just saying
it's tricky to move him because he was just traded and because he's 24, right? A 24-year-old in high A is not going to ever get you the return you necessarily is equal to his value, right? Like he's pitching well, so I don't think you're going to get someone that's playing as well as he's playing right now. But at the same time, like, right? Like, is there a market for a Peyton Pallette? If Peyton Pallette continues to struggle right now, like, does somebody want to buy low on him and take a shot on him for a high upside 18-year-old hitting prospect, right? Is that something the White Sox consider? Or, like you mentioned, like a Tyler Schweitzer, like somebody else. There's a lot of those pitchers. I don't want to see any of those guys go anywhere. I like watching them pitch, but there's so many pitchers in the system right now. So a question to consider, but Gowens gets our pitcher of the week, well-deserved, 2 weeks in a row, really, where he could have gotten this award, 2 weeks in a row where he's just been really, really good and kind of making us notice his name more in Winston. Hitter of the week this week, we went with Ryan Galanie. Ryan Galanie could have won hitter of the week. I think was he our hitter of the week last week? I think he might have been last week too, to be honest with you.
I think he was.
Ryan Galanie is just mashing. I mean, he's just, his numbers right now are pretty insane on the season. This is a guy who, like, can we get this guy to Winston? This is another guy that needs to be promoted, right? 23 years old, college experience. He's got a 10-10 OPS right now, Jeff. I mean, that's just silly numbers. He really just needs to be in Winston. I think this week his numbers, 7 hits, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, 5 walks. He's just getting on base all the time. His on base percentage at .441 right now, almost half of his at bats that he's getting on base. Galanie and that entire Kannapolis lineup with a huge week.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, you bump him up. There are a lot of, he's a first baseman, corner outfielder, and Winston has a lot of those guys, and they're having good years. But I guess you bump up Galanie and you prioritize him over somebody, the guy that you don't see the big upside for.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's tricky.
a lot of guys, Bryce Willett, Sean Goosenberg had really strong weeks. Uh, yeah, in Kannapolis, Caden Connor had a nice week. It's nice to see Ronnie Hernandez have a nice week. He's been
Yeah.
struggling a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys, and then up and down the lineup, there's players we like, but that's Galanie gets the nod again. Just another good week from him. There was other guys we liked as well. Bryce Willett's got consideration. Sean Goosenberg, both those guys had huge weeks in Winston-Salem as well. Two kind of older prospects in Winston who continue to hit at a pretty steady rate, right? That's our hitter and pitcher of the week. Let's do a quick wraparound at each level because we went a lot on those promotions, and we should because that's exciting, right? But tell me a little bit about Zach DeLoach's week. He'll be our kind of featured guy from Charlotte who had a big week.
Yeah. He's been off to a bit of a slow start, but this week, hopefully it's a sign of good things to come. He was 6 out of 17, 7 runs, 5 RBIs, 2 home runs, 3 walks, only 6 strikeouts. So, that's by far his best week. So we'll see if it's a 1 week phenomenon or if he's turning the corner.
Yeah, that's cool to see. It's exciting. That's a guy that, it's not a top prospect, right? He was kind of one of the additional pieces in that Gregory Santos deal, but someone that was really good last year and has struggled this year off the bat in AAA. So it's good to see him kind of getting himself back on track. Moving to Birmingham, we mentioned these guys earlier. We don't have to spend too much time on it. Jairo Uriarte was just phenomenal yesterday. Two starts this week. He had the Tuesday, Thursday, or the Tuesday, Sunday kind of double start in Birmingham with that 5-man rotation. And Uriarte, the stuff is just continuing to look excellent. He's giving up a few runs here and there, and the ERA doesn't fully do it justice, but the strikeout numbers are great. The command has been better of late. He had that one game where he had 7 or 8 walks or something crazy like that. And other than that, the command has looked a lot better in the past month for Uriarte. Drew Thorpe, another great game. Like we said, could be making his way to Chicago on Thursday. Wouldn't shock me. I would love to see it. In general, though, Thorpe with another huge week. And then mentioning him, we talked about him earlier with that conversation about Gonzalez, but Brooks Baldwin got back on track this week. After a little bit of a slump, he's kind of back to hitting great like he has been all season. And that guy's just, talk about like organizational like quality of drafting. I had a conversation with our guy Ian who runs all of our tech and is amazing for us at FutureSox. And me and Ian were talking about that 2022 draft class. When you look at the order of those draft picks, Jeff, there is just a crazy like run on just hit in terms of draft picks. And hitting on a draft pick, especially a late round pick, doesn't mean they're an MLB superstar, right? But if you can get a guy who's like producing in AA and is like a quality player in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round, whatever it might be, right? Like that is already just incredibly impressive. There was a run of, I'm gonna try and find this right here so I can go through it real quick. But there was a run in that draft class that reminded me when I was looking at the Baldwin thing, right? The 2022 White Sox draft class. It was, let's see. I'm going to pull this up real quick, Jeff, because I know you'll get a kick out of this one. In the late rounds, 9th. Okay, so I can mention. I'll start with Camilletti actually. 8th round, Mario Camilletti. 9th, Michael Turner. 10th, Tim Elko, already in Birmingham. Jacob Burke in the 11th, already in Birmingham. Brooks Baldwin in the 12th, already in Birmingham, dominating. Mason Adams in the 13th, already in Birmingham, dominating. Shane Murphy doing what we just talked about earlier in Winston. That's a crazy run from the 8th through 14th rounds. Every single guy has been a quality player in the minor league so far. It's a totally different world, the drafts in the past 2 years as opposed to all the drafts prior that we talked about. In the offseason, we did our draft look back, right? Like the last 2 drafts are producing talent, and this one looks to be the same way in 2024 so far. Making our way down to high A, we mentioned guys like Willits, Goosenberg, both those guys had big weeks. Exciting to see. It's always good to see that too, right? Like those late round draft picks, those college hitters, right? Seeing those guys produce, even in short spurts, is exciting, and it's cool to watch. Bryce Willits, I'm a big fan of him. He went to my school, so I'll be supporting that guy for sure. He had a huge week with 10 hits this week. That was awesome to see as well. Any other takeaways from Winston?
Well, we know that Eddie Park is, you mentioned, Eddie Park is there, and he's off to a really strong start. He looks really good right out of the gate. Calvin Harris is there after, I think, probably recovering from an injury, and he's off to a bit of a slow start, but he's starting to warm up as well. And then there's, Wes Kath. We remain fascinated with him. He leads the team in home runs, so he's starting to get to that power that we know is there. But still a lot of strikeouts and still a lot of questions about contact. So
Yeah.
hopefully he seems to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, love what I've seen from Kath this year. Definitely a huge step forward, and a guy that's only 21 still, right? Like it seems like he's been in the org forever, but like as a high school draft pick, he's still super young, and the power and the swing adjustments this year have been very clear to me. Going to Kannapolis, I want to mention that 22-run game. That it was crazy. 22 runs. Are we serious?
Yeah, that really boosted everybody's batting average. That was pretty amazing.
That was pretty awesome to see. So Canny, the lineup there in general, from Galanie to Caden Connor, who I talked to last week, definitely check out that interview. That was a lot of fun. And everybody else in between there, right? Nushida and, all those guys and now Burrowes being there. That Canny lineup is a lot of fun. Really, Canny is a team that I would be tuning into, especially on an Aldrin Batista start. I would check that out. As Grant Taylor start as well. Like for those that are trying to kind of learn about some of the long-term pieces, right? Like that team has a lot of pieces where you can look and see some really, really legit upside. Which is cool to see.
Top 4 or 5 hitters are really exciting with Nishida and then Galanie and then Connor
and Burrowes,
and then and you got Burrowes in there. That's right. They slotted him up near the top as well.
Yeah, he's hitting 2 now.
And then in the middle, you've got guys like Ronnie Hernandez and that's an up and coming lineup with a terrific pitching staff.
Yeah.
And I know this is going to be a little off topic, but I got to tell you about one of the games I saw this week in Kannapolis. It was Drew McDaniel, who pitched 7 innings, 5 hit shutout, no walks, 9 strikeouts. And I told him afterward, I said, Drew, I've seen Noah Schultz, I've seen Nick Nastrini, I've seen Jonathan Cannon in person. This is the best pitch game I've seen this year. He had everything working every inning. It was just flawless, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. I love to hear that as well. McDaniel's a guy that's impressed me this season as someone who's not on the radar to the same degree as some of those other guys there, right? But has looked consistently really strong all season as an undrafted guy too. Just came in, signed to the organization, and has looked steady. So that's great. And Canny, that team is a lot of fun. They had a heck of a week this week offensively and pitching wise, right? And then wrapping up here, we go to the Arizona Complex League. 2 prospects I want to mention. I'll keep it simple, but 2 guys that we kind of look at as like, when you're really looking long-term and you're looking at just the pure upside, top 30 prospects that have just the most raw upside. Look no further than the Arizona Complex League with George Walkow and Javier Maganolin. Whew, Jeff, these stats. Let me read some of these for you. So far this season, George Walkow in 39 ABs, 1063 OPS, 2 home runs, 6 doubles, 5 walks already, in addition to 2 stolen bases. George flashing a little bit of that speed for a 6'7" guy. A lot of strikeouts, right? Like the strikeout rate is still higher than you'd like it to be for Walkow for sure. But when he's making contact, the ball is hit real hard and real far. And that's just something with Walkow where like just turned 18 recently, like this year, right? So he's going to spend the entire season in Arizona, most likely. He might make his way to Canny at the end of the year, but 18 years old, 6'7". That video of the home run he hit in Arizona last week or a week and a half ago, I saw that ball and I was like, that ball had to be 440, 450 probably. I mean, it's the power is off the charts. And then you look at a guy like Javier Maganolin. I would love to see these two in like a picture together. Javier Maganolin is 5'8" on a good day. He's listed at 5'8", 160. He might even be smaller than that, but super twitchy swing, a ton of speed. He's got a 922 OPS. He hit 2 home runs this past week, 8 stolen bases as well, and 11 walks for Maganolin in his first 10 games in the ACL. Wow. So it's speed, it's approach, it's twitchiness, a small dude with a lot of power, and really just an athletic, quick guy. He dominated in the Dominican League last year. He will also be 18 this entire season. That duo is going to be a lot of fun once we get to see them in professional ball probably next year.
And you know me, Elijah. I love these guys who have more walks than strikeouts.
Yeah,
that just suggests elite plate discipline.
Yeah, especially for an 18-year-old, right? Like this isn't a college guy. This guy's McGonagall's 18 years old, and he's walking 11 times in his first 10 Arizona Complex League games. So really a lot to like in the complex. There's Stevan Flores had a big week too. Abraham Nunez had a few good games. Like there's some really cool young players down there, headlined by Walkow and McGonagall. And then another guy I want to mention real briefly, and then we got to wrap this one up because we keep talking here. But Tristan Stivers, I don't remember him from last year, right? Made his debut last season. Another 22 draft pick guy, late round draft pick, right? I had a great interview with him. He was a really interesting guy. But he also, is rehabbing right now, rehabbing an injury in Arizona, got back into some games into the Arizona Complex League. I expect him in the near future to make his way back to Birmingham, most likely. I think he might get a rehab. He might start do a few games in either Canny or Winston at first, but finish the year last year in Birmingham. He'll probably join an already ridiculous Birmingham pitching staff. That bullpen's also been great in Birmingham. So Stivers is looking good in his rehab starts and will hopefully make his way back to Birmingham sooner than later. Another note from the Complex League. So it's an exciting time, Jeff. I want to give people a little bit of a preview. This was kind of our focus on promotions. Next week for our Memorial Day episode, which will come out on that Monday, we are pre-recording. We're going to have some cool interviews, really good stuff coming up. It's going to be fun. I don't want to give too much away, but we're hoping we're going to talk to one of our new FutureSox contributors. We're going to talk to a manager of one of these minor league teams that we always talk about. So it's going to be really fun. We're going to have a cool little double feature interview type of episode next week. We've got a lot of other interviews coming up. We're going to have some cool draft talk starting in June. The MLB draft is on the horizon. The White Sox with the 5th overall pick. Lots of good options. So we're really pumped up. There's a lot to come, and we are excited. I'm excited to do more of these interviews with you, Jeff, and just continue to talk about all these prospects that we love talking about.
Yeah, it's a great time. We're gonna continue to see the guys move. We don't know who they are and what the ramifications are going to be, but we know it's going to happen, and we're going to see some in June. And like you said, we've got some great guests lined up for over the next 4 weeks. I think people are going to get a real kick out of some of these folks. Great insight.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. So that's all for this edition of the FutureSox Roundup, and we will talk to you next week with some fun interviews.